All right, we're about to go on a journey, an expedition through the history of psychology. We're going to try and understand how we, as a species, have tried to map what is maybe the most complex territory in the entire universe, the human mind.
So let's just start with the biggest question of them all, right? The one the guys like Socrates thought was the key to everything. Who are you? Really?
And then comes the follow-up, which is maybe even trickier. How do you actually know? How can you be so sure that the person you think you are is the real you? I mean, where does that feeling, that sense of self, even come from?
You know, for centuries, some of the greatest thinkers on the planet have been on this exact quest, trying to draw a map of our inner world. And today, we're going to follow in their footsteps.
Our story actually begins not with brains, but with bodies. It starts with the very first attempts to chart our personalities and maybe even find a way to directly influence the mind itself.
So one of the earliest maps we have comes from the ancient physician Galen. He had this idea that your personality was basically determined by the balance of 4 fluids in your body. He called them humors. So for example, if you had too much blood, you were cheerful and optimistic. Too much black bile, and you were kind of poetic but sad. It was a simple physical map for a really complex inner world.
But then, explorers of the mind started looking for a more direct route. It all kicked off with Franz Mesmer and his kind of mystical idea of animal magnetism. But that idea evolved. A guy named Abbe Faria realized he could put someone in a trance with just a single command. And finally, James Braid gave it a proper scientific name, hypnosis. This wasn't magic. It was a state of heightened suggestibility, our first real tool for getting in there and interacting with the hidden parts of the mind.
And that tool, hypnosis, would lead to the discovery of a vast, hidden continent inside all of us. Sigmund Freud used it to build his theory that everything we're actually aware of, our conscious thoughts and feelings, that's just the tip of a massive psychological iceberg.
He called it the unconscious. And this was a really radical idea. Freud was basically saying that we are strangers in our own minds, that we're driven by these deep forces we can't even see. This hidden reservoir of repressed memories and primal urges, he argued, was the real engine driving our behavior. It gave the map of the mind a whole new and very controversial dimension.
But as you can imagine, not everyone was on board with exploring this invisible world. A whole new school of thought came along, a scientific backlash, really, that demanded we treat the mind like any other science. Their motto was pretty much, if you can't see it and measure it, it's not real.
Just listen to this quote from John B. Watson, the father of behaviorism. The force of this rejection is incredible. He was essentially declaring war on both Freud and genetics, arguing that we're all born as blank slates. Everything we become is shaped purely by our environment.
So this led the behaviorists to something called the law of effect. The idea was to forget the unconscious completely and only study what you could see, observable behavior. It's really simple. If an action gets you a reward, you do it more. If it gets you a punishment, you do it less. That's it. It was simple, it was measurable, and for a while, it totally took over psychology.
But here's the thing. You can't ignore the mind forever. By the mid-20th century, a new revolution was brewing. Psychologists started to think about the mind not as some mysterious void, but as something way more familiar to them, a computer.
Suddenly, the mind wasn't a blank slate. It was an information processor. And people like George Miller started testing its specs, its limitations. He discovered that most of us can hold about 7 pieces of information, give or take 2, in our short-term memory. The mind had rules, it had limits, and it had a structure you could actually study scientifically.
And this information processing view also helps explain some really weird things our minds do, like cognitive dissonance. Leon Fessinger's theory shows just how much our brains hate inconsistency. When we're faced with facts that contradict our deep-seated beliefs, our mind feels this awful discomfort and will do almost anything to make it go away, even if that means twisting the facts to fit what we already believe.
But while some people were mapping our internal processor, others made a really shocking discovery. Sometimes, the map of our personality doesn't matter nearly as much as the terrain we're on. The situation we find ourselves in can completely overwhelm who we think we are.
Take Solomon Asch's experiment. It's a super simple perception test, but when everyone else in the room starts giving an answer that is obviously wrong, a startling number of people will just go along with them, doubting their own eyes just so they can fit in.
And it gets even more chilling with Stanley Milgram's experiment. He had ordinary people deliver what they believed were increasingly painful electric shocks to another person, just for getting answers wrong on a test. They could hear the person on the other side screaming, begging them to stop. And this is the number that just shocked the world. 65%. 65% of the participants went all the way to the final 450-volt shock, just because a guy in a lab coat told them to.
And then Philip Zimbardo's famous Stanford prison experiment just reinforced the whole point. You put good people in a bad situation, you give them roles, and they can transform in truly terrifying ways. The situation, it turns out, can be so much more powerful than the individual.
So where has this whole journey brought us? Well, today, we see the mind as this incredibly powerful and adaptable thing, but it's also full of bugs and glitches. It has amazing potential, but also some really profound pitfalls.
On the one hand, you've got pioneers like Martin Seligman, who totally flipped the script. Instead of just studying what's wrong with us, positive psychology asks what's right with us, what makes a life fulfilling, what creates real happiness. But on the other hand, we've learned that our mental hardware can be pretty faulty. To see what I mean, just listen to this quick list of words. Ready? Bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, night, snooze. Got it? Okay, now take a second. Was the word sleep on that list? Be honest with yourself. Most people are pretty sure they heard it. It wasn't. The word sleep was never on the list. If you thought it was, you just experienced a false memory. As the incredible researcher Elizabeth Loftus proved, our memory doesn't work like a video recording. Every single time we remember something, we are actively reconstructing it, and a lot of the time, we get it wrong.
In fact, the psychologist Daniel Schachter argues that these memory errors, he calls them the 7 sins of memory, they aren't just glitches, they're a fundamental feature of our cognitive design. It's the price we pay for having a flexible, efficient mind.
And this leaves us right back where we started, but with an even deeper question. Our journey to map the mind has shown us just how powerful situations are, how irrational our thinking can be, and how completely unreliable our own memories are. So, if we can't always trust our own minds, what can we truly be sure of?